I don't know what happened between here and when we got it, but at some point it got bastardized. The idea of karma got bastardized into just cosmic retribution, and that's not what it is at all. Welcome back to another session of Moving Different, Living Yoga Off the Mat. Last time we started off our exploration. Well, not last time. Actually, it was the time before last we started off talking about all the different paths of yoga. And the goal of yoga is really where this group of sessions has begun. And we'll remember that sutra from book 1, sutra 2, the goal of yoga is the restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff, or yoga is the uniting of the consciousness in the heart. And that was from our 2 texts of choice. Well, my 2 texts of choice. I'm sure everybody has their own text of choice, but the translations of the sutras of Patanjali that I use for this particular series, that is how Nischala Joy Devi describes the goal of yoga, and Swami Satchidananda describes the goal of yoga. So every yogi, we talked about a couple weeks ago, maybe last month, we talked about every yogi having their own definition of what yoga is, and mine is the liberation of the mind to reunite with the heart. So all of us, every yogi, every teacher, that should be their goal, is liberation of the mind from all of the worldly stuff that keeps us from realizing our divine path, our divine work. So once again, there are several different paths of yoga, different ways to practice beyond, not beyond, including the Ashtanga path or the 8-limb path. There are other ways that we can practice, other combinations of those 8 limbs that we can use to achieve that liberation, that relief of the modifications of the mind. And the last time, legitimately the last time, we talked about 2 paths: Bhakti Yoga, the devotional path, and Kriya Yoga, the threefold path. And Bhakti Yoga is just have faith in your connection between yourself and the higher power, however you believe that higher power is. And Kriya Yoga is discipline with tapas, vidyaya, and self-study, and Ishvara Panadhana, which is also devotion. So those 2 paths, if you're doing those 2 things, you're already doing the yoga. So you don't really need to go beyond that. But as I mentioned last time, sometimes we need more. Some of us need a little bit more understanding, more information, need things to be broken down even more so we understand that most of our issues, that most of the obstacles, I'll use that word, most of our obstacles in this life are our own making. And we'll get into those when we talk about karma yoga and the kleshas. Now, before we get into the kleshas, we'll go back to the sutras that describe Kriya Yoga. So we're not like just jumping into the middle, because remember, the sutras is a list. It's not allegorical. I remembered, I figured out what the word was that I was looking for. It's not a story. It's just like a list of instructions. So if I just go to Sutra 3, where we start to discuss book 2, Sutra 3, and start talking about the kleshas and how they're described, is going to seem very disjointed. So we'll go back and to book 2, Sutra 2, and I'll read from Satchidananda's commentary. And for book 2, Sutras 1 and 2, accepting pain as help for purification, study of spiritual books, and surrender to the supreme beings constitutes yoga in action. They help us minimize obstacles and obtain samadhi. So that's the description of Kriya Yoga. And then Sutra 3, we start to talk about these kleshas and what the kleshas are. So in a list, there are 5 kleshas, and just the list of them is avidya, asmita, raga, devesha, abhinavesha. So there are 5 obstacles. Now, not Patanjali, he describes all of it. Satchidananda describes it very succinctly. The definitions are arrogance, egoism, attachment, hatred, and clinging to bodily life are the 5 obstacles. Exactly that. Cut and dry. Very few words. Nischala Joy Devi's much more descriptive and fluid description of Sutra 3, Book 2, Sutra 3 is dissolving the 5 kleshas or veils, bring forth the radiance of the divine self. The 5 kleshas or veils are avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinavesha. Now, in both of their translations, they use their English translations. I'm going to go into them one by one. So we'll reveal them later. It's not a surprise. If you have the books, you can just Google them. And they both use slightly different words. And if you have your own translations or interpretations, they might use different words as well. But these 2 specific, I love because of the way that they describe kleshas. Satchidananda describes kleshas as an obstacle. Fine, it's big, in your way, a solid object that is blocking your path. Nischala Joy Devi describes the kleshas as veils, something you can see through, something you can push aside, something that doesn't necessarily have to be a big deal if we don't make it through, right? I mentioned previously the difference in their interpretations. It's very masculine and very feminine, and that's not negative. Yoga is the warrior's path. So I understand why Patanjali probably use these very short and concise directives on how we practice yoga. So Satchidananda, in turn, very precise. Everything is very black and white. Do this, do this, do this. Don't do that. Do this. Don't do that. You can't be this if you are that. And that makes things a little bit difficult if you live in the gray, because, most of life is gray. And even Satchidananda says most of life is gray. He developed integral yoga. He did all of the yogas. But sometimes it's hard to convey that when you're translating from multiple languages, because Sanskrit, not his language either. So we use the words that are available. It might not even be the words that Patanjali intended, but we know that those 5 things are the things that keep us from recognizing the divinity in ourselves. And those 5 things are absolutely within our control. And those 5 kleshas are avidya, asmita, raga, devasya, and abhinavesha. I'm working on my Sanskrit, y'all. Is it getting better? I don't know. So let's talk about these kleshas, these veils, one at a time, bit by bit. So we can understand how they affect our life, right? So the first one, avidya. And I'll start with Satchidananda's commentary because that's the first one that I know, and it's the oldest one that I know, specifically, not the oldest one in existence, of course. Satchidananda writes, Book 2, Sutra 4 is ignorance is the feel for the others mentioned after it, whether they are dormant, feeble, intercepted, or sustained. Ignorance is avidya. That is the first klesha. And if you have ignorance, you're going to have all of them anyway. So it doesn't even matter. Nischala Joy Devi, the same klesha, veil, as she describes them, and Sutra 4 of Book 2, she describes avidya as innocence. Innocence of our divine nature creates a fertile field where dormant seeds of the other four veils take root. So innocence versus ignorance. Just the ignorance is very hard, it's jarring, it's difficult to understand, to accept your own lack of knowledge, because that's really what ignorance is. It's the lack of knowledge or understanding of something. We live in a society that, well, we live in a society that often the lack of knowledge is rewarded. Or oh no, I was going so good, we live in a society where the lack of knowledge is sometimes rewarded, where it's okay to not know stuff, but also too, being honest in that lack of knowledge is met with ridicule. Like if somebody asks a lot of questions, we call them stupid, or they could just be curious. Like people want to know stuff sometimes. Children often ask a lot of questions in school and they get told that be quiet, don't ask that at this time, blah blah blah, this that and the third. So we are often steered away from voicing our own lack of knowledge because it's frowned upon. But how are we supposed to know anything? So I understand why in Nischala Joy Devi's translation, interpretation, and commentary, she describes avidya as innocence of the divine self, because it's a much softer way to say it's almost like bless your heart. Like if you have ever encountered Southern people, you know that's not a compliment. They feel bad for you. But in the sweetest way. They want to help you. You want to help someone who's innocent. So how about see yourself as innocent? Your lack of understanding, your lack of knowledge of self, if you are soft and your interpretation of that lack of knowledge, you might be willing to go explore a little bit deeper. You get called ignorant, your first reaction is to be defensive of it. Oh, no, I'm not. Yeah, you are. Most of us are. All of us are. We live in this world. I have to constantly remind myself that just because I live in it doesn't mean that I have to be of it. And that's really what this yoga is about, is liberation from the mind stuff. So innocence versus ignorance. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Ignorance of the self. And if you don't see who you are through all the stuff that you've been through, well, guess what? None of this else is going to matter. All of the other things, all of the other kleshas are going to be able to take hold and block your path, block your vision, just in case you're not quite sure what they mean, what is meant, Patanjali means by ignorance, avidya. He goes on to explain in Sutra 5 what exactly is ignorance, avidya. And Satchidananda says, ignorance is regarding the impermanence as permanent, the impure as pure, the painful as pleasant, and the non-self as the self. Nischala Joy Devi describes innocence of our divine nature, encourages identification with the ever-changing rather than with the inner stillness of the heart. So we don't see that we are separate from all that, all the stuff. And if we always see ourselves and identify with this stuff, then how then can anything we do moving forward not be tainted with the stuff? Our next klesha, Asmita, is described in Book 2, Sutra 6. Egoism is the identification, as it were, of the power of the seer, Purusha, with that of the instrument of the seeing, body mind. Egoism is the identification, as it were, of the power of the seer with that of the instrument of seeing. Asmita, according to Satchidananda, is egoism. Nischala Joy Devi describes Asmita. When undue trust is placed in the individual self, it is confused with the divine self. A little bit more straightforward than identification, as it were, over the power of the seer with the instrument of the seeing. When undue trust is placed in the individual self, it is confused with the divine self. So, seer versus seen. Now, if we went through the sutras from 1 all the way through, we would have encountered these terms before. Purusha, seer, seen, all of that is described in the beginnings of, in the first book. All of the steps, all of the things are described in the first book. But because we're doing this jumping around thing, of course, you got to jump around with me. So we'll jump ahead a little bit into jhana yoga, just to dabble into, just to dabble, so we can better understand Purusha and Prakriti. So I'm just going to read from Satchidananda's and we'll talk about it. Book 2, Sutras 15 through 17 say, to one of discrimination, everything is painful indeed, due to its consequences. The anxiety and fear over losing what is gained, the resulting impressions left in the mind to create renewed cravings, and the constant conflict among the 3 gunas, which control the mind. Pain that has not yet come is avoidable. The cause of that avoidable pain is the union of the seer and the seen. Pain that is avoidable. The cause of that avoidable pain is the union of the seer, Purusha, and the seen, Prakriti. Nischala Joy Devi describes the same sutras as intuitive wisdom, empowers us to expand beyond the constantly changing natural world, seen, to the abode of the divine spirit, seer. With this understanding, once vital difficulties become impotent. The source of these difficulties is the inability to recognize the divine spirit as omniscient and therefore separate from the constantly changing natural world, the scene. So once again, they say the exact same thing, just with slightly different words. Satchidananda's interpretation is a little harsh, to one of discrimination. Everything's bad. If you see yourself as separate all the time, everything's bad. All you have is anxiety. Nischala Joy Devi is more, if you have wisdom, the wisdom is recognizing that, sometimes things aren't going to go your way, and that's okay. But all of that is in service to you, whether things go your way or don't. It's not something that is happening to you. It's in service of you. So since we're jumping around and clearing things up, let's try and clear up our definition, our understanding of karma. I don't know what happened between here and when we got it, but at some point it got bastardized. The idea of karma got bastardized into just cosmic retribution. And that's not what it is at all. In the sutras, karma is simply the reaction of your actions. And in the sutras, something called karma sala is mentioned. And that is the womb of those reactions. So the kleshas are the reasons that those reactions come up. And maybe that's where the misunderstanding comes up, because those kleshas are seen as distasteful ignorance and egoism, as we've mentioned already. And because they are distasteful, maybe that's where our misunderstanding of karma begins. Because those reactions, the repeating of the cycle of life, if you are a part of the tradition where yoga comes from, and you believe that those reactions to our sometimes poor actions result in these karmas, then yeah, it gets a bad spin on it, you know? So we'll come back to karma when we get through all the kleshas. But I just wanted to, since we were pausing, we should just pause here, you know? And we're back on the kleshas, the veils, the obstacles. And the next ones we're going to talk about together because they kind of go hand in hand, two sides of the same coin, raga and dvesha. And I'll read Satchidananda's interpretation first of both. Book 2, Sutra 7 and 8. And then I'll read Nischala Joy Devi's, and then we'll, bounce around about how we feel about them, right? So Satchidananda describes Book 2, Sutra 7 and 8 as raga is that which follows identification with pleasurable experiences. Dvesha is that which follows identification with painful experiences. Nischala Joy Devi describes the same sutras as excessive fondness for fleeting pleasures causes longing, causes raga. Excessive avoidance of unpleasant experiences causes dvesha. So in her interpretation, she describes raga as longing and dvesha as disdain. So a little bit stronger language, right, from on this time on our more nuanced interpretation than attachment and aversion. Because it's not necessarily attachment that's the issue. It's the identification with the attachment that's the problem. So when attachment can simply be me saying that I like yoga. So me coming to my mat I could interpret it when reading these sutras, I can interpret that as me being attached to this practice. And I might develop some kind of icky feelings about the joy that comes from my practice of yoga. Now, longing is different than attachment. Longing is the craving, the if I don't get it, what's going to happen? That part. I can be on my mat or not on my mat. Like, I can practice yoga in my car. I cannot practice at all and still be okay because I don't long for it. I just do it. I just am it. So there's no confusion with a healthy relationship with a practice, with a thing, a person, because we kind of have to be attached to people. Humans are pack animals. We need connections. All of us are connected, right? It's when those connections create problems in our lives, when those connections move us off our path, when those connections diminish us or keep us from recognizing our highest self, our highest good. That is when attachment becomes an issue. It becomes a klesha. Is when we that longing keeps us from living our highest good. And the same thing goes for our dresa, our avoidance, disdain. That's why I'm certain that that's why she used the word disdain, because, excuse me, it's more harsh than avoidance, aversion. So the final klesha, a benevasia, is a little bit more difficult to manage. So according to Satchidananda, a benevasia is clinging to life. Book 2, Sutra 9, is clinging to life, flowing by its own potency due to past experiences, exists even in the wise. Nischala Joy Devi describes the same sutra as the elusive awareness of immortality is inherent even for the wise. So a little bit more straightforward to say that, listen, even the wisest among us is afraid to die. Even the wisest among us forgets that this vessel, Prakriti, is not the reason for anything, right? We all have lost a loved one or a place or whatever. We all experience connection and fondness, fondness for our existence here. Um, and that fondness for our existence on this plane often keeps us from recognizing our highest good, because remember, our highest good is timeless, is unaffected by any of this. The self is not the vessel, remember, right? So once we recognize all of these kleshas, that's half the battle. Half the battle is seeing it and recognizing that first one, we're very easily going to see the others. And lucky for us, Patanjali is like, listen, all right, so if we recognize all of them, what do you do about it? And Sutras 10 and 11 give very specific instructions. In subtle form, these obstacles can be destroyed by resolving them back into their primal cause, the ego. and the active state, they can be destroyed by meditation. Nischala Joy Devi describes 10 and 11 as, with keen observation and discretion, these kleshas become translucent. If they have manifested into action, the veils must be dissolved through inward practice. So, one thing that I do like about her description of the kleshas is that they become translucent. Not that they're resolved, but that they still exist, but they're not an issue anymore. Because you're still a human. Regardless of all of this, we still exist in this world. So we will still be affected by these kleshas. We will still see them. They will still exist on our path. But how do we move with them, right? But Satchidananda's interpretation and resolving them back into the ego makes the description of karma yoga a little bit more digestible. So we use both. When talking about karma and karma yoga, we already did the whole re-explanation and deconstruction of what karma has become in the West and described karma sala. But I will use Nischala Joy Devi's interpretation because it's just easier for me to understand and to relay, because the punctuation is very strange in Satchidananda's. And it's not because of anything that he did. It's because of, words aren't really words all the time when they translate from one language to another. So, Book 2, Sutras 12 through 14, Karma Sala, sheathed by the kleshas, gives birth to experience now and in the future. As long as the veils encase the womb of karma, all actions will be affected. Karma bears fruits according to the type and quality of the seeds planted and the care given to its growth. I'm going to read them again. Karma Sala, sheathed by the kleshas, gives birth to experiences now and in the future. As long as the kleshas encase the karma sala, all actions will be affected. Karma bears fruit according to the type and quality of the seeds planted and the care given to its growth. You reap what you sow. And that's exactly what she calls the chapter. But her chapter on karma yoga, on karma and karma yoga, or selfless service. And that's literally without the ego, not selfless in the sense of charity or in the, whatever the word is, I'm going to flash it here because I can't think of it right now. But altruistic, it came to me. Not selfless in an altruistic sense, but like literally without any ego involved, without doing something, without worrying about what is going to get you in the long run. Doing your work, whatever that is, your job, your service, without worrying about the accolades that might come, the promotion that is looming in the future. Just do your job, bro. Do your job because it's your job. Not just like in the corporate sense, but like, in the sense of our duty and dharma and our divine work. So that's karma yoga and the kleshas. I think that's all I got for now. If you liked it, great. If not, that's cool too. Until next time, be well.